Hey students, in this video we're going to talk about the distributive property. We're going to do a few examples of that, and then we're going to combine that with what we did in the last video with combining like terms and learn how to simplify expressions using those two concepts. In 6th grade you talk a little bit about the distributive property, so this will probably be review for you, but let me just refresh you on what we mean by this. So if you think of just any three numbers, we're going to call those A, B, and C. They can be whole numbers, they can be fractions, they can be positives, negatives, just any three numbers. If you were to take one of those numbers, we're going to call that A, times the sum of the other two numbers, we're going to call that B plus C. So we say A times the quantity B plus C, then that would be the same thing as taking the first number A times that second number B, or AB, plus that first number A times the second number C, AC. So this is what the distributive property says. It says that a number times the sum of two other numbers is equal to the sum of the product of the first number and the second number and the first number and the third number. Now let me put that in English by giving you an example with some actual numbers. So if you took 4 times the sum of 20 plus 6, that would be the same thing as 4 times 26. That would be equal to 4 times 20 plus 4 times 6. You can take this 4 and you can distribute it to the 20 and the 6, multiply each of those separately, and then add your answer together, and you get the same thing. Okay, so let's look and see how this applies to some examples in algebra. So the first example on your sheet, you see 7 times the quantity 2x plus 3. In order to simplify this expression, we're going to apply the distributive property, which says I take the 7 times my first term, which is 2x. So 7 times 2x is going to be 14x. And then I have to take the 7 and I have to distribute it to my second term as well. So I have to do 7 times 3. 7 times 3 is 21, so this would give me a plus 21. We learned in the last video that 14x and 21 are unlike terms, so we can't combine those together, and so that means this would be our answer. In the next example, we have 12 times the quantity 3 minus 1/6 t. If you distribute your 12 to your 3, 12 times 3 gives you 36. And then when we distribute 12 to this negative 1/6 t, first thing I want you to notice is that you've got a positive 12 times a negative 1/6 t here. So a positive times a negative is going to give us a negative down here. 12 times 1/6 would be the same thing as 12 over 1 times 1/6, which gives us 2. So this means we're going to get a minus 2t. So the answer to this problem would be 36 minus 2t. Our next example, we have the quantity 0.4 plus 1.1c times negative 3. And at first glance, it looks like this one might be a little bit different than the first two, but all we've done is we've switched the order on the multiplication. Instead of having the negative 3 out front and then having the 0.4 plus 1.1c, we've written it in a different order. Okay, if you want to, you can switch the order around and rewrite it like this. That would be perfectly fine. You'd still get to the same answer. Or you can just think about the distributive property being drawn like this. So if we take our negative 3 and we take it times our first term over here, 0.4, negative 3 times 0.4 would be negative 1.2. And then here, we take negative 3 times 1.1c, a negative times a positive is again a negative. 1.1 times 3 is 3.3, so that would be 3.3c. Okay, at number 4, that one definitely does not look like any of the first three there, because you see we've got a fraction with two terms in the numerator, a 4x and a negative 16, and then a 3 in the denominator. Doesn't look like we have any parentheses anywhere, doesn't look anything like the distributive property at first glance. But what I want you to think about is what does dividing by 3 really mean? Because that's what this fraction bar here means. In case you forgot, fraction bars, anytime you see that, that is just another way of writing divide. So what this problem is really telling us to do is it's telling us to take the quantity 4x minus 16, which I can put in parentheses, and divide that whole thing by 3. Well, dividing by 3 means the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. Okay, dividing by 3, same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal of 3, which is 1/3. So if I rewrote this as a multiplication problem, I could write the quantity 4x minus 16 in parentheses times 1/3. And now it looks a lot more like our distributive property that we saw in examples 1, 2, and 3. So anytime you get a problem like this and it's written as a fraction, you can rewrite the problem as a multiplication problem if you just take that denominator and you make the reciprocal out here like we did with the 1/3. So now if we take 1/3 times 4x, 1/3 times 4 is just 4/3. So we would say that this is 4/3 x. And then 1/3 times negative 16 would just be minus positive times a negative 16 over 3. Now in 6th grade you were probably asked to simplify your improper fractions and make the mixed numbers. I do not need you to do that in 7th grade. You can leave your fractions improper, that's perfectly fine, just make sure they're reduced. So 4/3 is reduced because nothing goes into 4 and 3 besides 1, and so is 16/3. Nothing goes into those two besides 1. So we're going to say that this is our final answer, 4/3 x minus 16/3. The next example, number 5, is very similar to number 4. So we have the quantity 4 plus 2x, and we're dividing the whole thing by 8. So again, I'm going to rewrite this as a multiplication problem. Instead of dividing by 8, we're going to make this multiplied by 1/8. So it would be 1/8 times the quantity 4 plus 2x. Okay, so now when I take my 1/8 times 4, I end up getting 4/8. And when I distribute my 1/8 to my 2x, I get plus 2/8 x. Now in this case, your two fractions will reduce. 4/8 actually reduces to 1/2, and 2/8 reduces to 1/4. So my answer to this would be 1/2 plus 1/4 x. Okay, and then in the last example for this section here, you've got negative quantity of 4x minus 12. Well, what this negative sign here outside of these parentheses really means is multiply the quantity 4x minus 12 by negative 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to distribute negative 1 to our 4x. Negative 1 times positive 4x would just become negative 4x. And then we're going to take negative 1 times negative 12. Here's where you need to be careful. A negative times a negative is a positive, so down here in the next step your sign's going to change. This is going to become positive 12. So your simplified expression would be negative 4x plus 12. Okay, moving on to putting together what we did in the last video and this video. So when you're asked to simplify expressions, you want to look at two things. Okay, you want to make sure you've done two things. You want to first of all make sure that you have distributed on those expressions. So anytime we're simplifying expressions, the first thing we're going to do is apply the distributive property. And then the second thing you want to do is make sure you've combined all like terms. So those are the two things I want you to look for anytime you're asked to simplify an algebraic expression. Distribute and then combine like terms. So keeping that in mind, let's look at examples 7 and 8. In example 7, we have 5 plus 6 times the quantity m plus 1. In this example, you might be tempted to say 5 plus 6 is 11. I'll agree that 5 plus 6 is 11, however, if you do that, you're breaking the order of operations. If you remember order of operations, we always have to multiply before we add, and this right here, okay, this whole part, 6 times the quantity n plus 1, is really multiplication. So we need to simplify this part first before we do anything with the 5, and that's why I say distribute before you do any combining of like terms. Okay, so we're going to take 6 times the quantity m plus 1. That would give us 6m plus 6, and then we're just going to bring this 5 down. So we have 5 plus 6m plus 6. Now that we've distributed, we can combine our like terms. Okay, so we have a positive 5 here that we can combine with this positive 6, and that would give us positive 11. And then this 6m, there are no other m's in the problem, so we can just bring that straight down. So your answer would be 11 plus 6m. Okay, in example 8, we're going to do the same thing. Distribute first, and so I see I can distribute in 2 spots on this problem. I can distribute here, 2 times the quantity 1 minus d. 2 times 1 is 2, and then 2 times a negative d is just like saying 2 times negative 1d, so that would be negative 2d. I can also distribute over here with this minus sign. Again, when you see a minus sign directly in front of parentheses like this, it means multiply by negative 1. So we're going to take negative 1 times 2d, which gives me negative 2d. Negative 1 times positive 1 gives us negative 1. Watch the sign right here. And then at the end we still have this plus d hanging on. Okay, so always be sure to check your signs carefully when you're doing a problem like this, especially when there's a lot of negative signs involved. And once you've distributed, then we're going to go through and combine like terms. So here I have a 2, positive 2, and then down here I have a negative 1. 2 minus 1 is positive 1. And then I have a lot of d's in this problem. I have a negative 2d, another negative 2d, so that gives me negative 4d, and then a positive 1d. Negative 4d plus 1d is going to be a minus 3d. So your answer for this problem would be 1 minus 3d. Okay, I want you to try the last 2 examples, 9 and 10, on your own. Here they are for you. So go ahead and pause the video, try both of these, and then you can click play to check your answers. Okay, let's check our answers to 9 and 10. For number 9, you should have gotten 14c minus 6. So distribute 2 to 4c minus 3, and then you can combine your like terms 6c and 8c to get your 14c. For number 10, if you go through and distribute the 5 to the quantity 2 minus j, you get 10 minus 5j. Here, for the quantity 2j minus 3, you're distributing a positive 1, since there's a plus sign in front of these parentheses instead of a minus sign, and all that really does is gives you the same thing you had in the parentheses, 2j minus 3. So that really doesn't change any signs there. And then you can just bring down your plus j cubed. When you combine your like terms, you have a 10 minus 3, which is positive 7. A negative 5j plus 2j is a negative 3j, and then that j cubed just gets brought down. Okay, again, just like the last video, if you have any questions over anything we did, be sure to jot it down somewhere in the margins or on a separate sheet of paper. Make sure you have at least one question for this video, and I will see you guys next time in class. Have a nice day. You are all wonderful people.